My name is Mark Brady, and I'm the Deputy Chief Data Officer for TRMC. TRMC oversees testing of all the new Department of Defense weapon systems. And I bet you're all wondering what's going to happen in the future with AI. And so today I'm going to make some predictions. I'm going to talk about what's going to happen and why I think that's the case. Okay, so before we get into that though, I want to take a look at how our ideas about what intelligence is. So the classical concept of what intelligence is that it's all about reason, higher reason. And so that's a facility which is actually mediated in the frontal lobes along with vocalization, language generation, and other motor functions. So all these things are related, and AI researchers might want to take note. You also have posterior in the brain. You've got the occipital lobe, which is devoted to vision. Vision is also mediated in the temporal lobes, the parts of the parietal lobes and interior to the brain, a lot of real estate. So when researchers first started studying this, they thought, well, this is going to be easy, but it turned out to be a lot harder than they thought. Likewise for the motor functions and robotic control. Also audition is in the temporal lobes, as well as language understanding. So what of all these things constitute intelligence? Well, I think they all do, because as we're starting to realize, they're a lot more challenging, they're a lot more involved, they require a lot more computation than we originally conceived of. And there's really no threshold at which we can say some information processing is intelligence and some isn't. Intelligence is really a matter of degree. So given that, then what is artificial intelligence? So artificial intelligence is intelligence which used to be uniquely human, but is no longer, which is recently taken over by machines. And so for that reason, it's a moving target. If you think of something like the calculator, going all the way back to the Greeks thousands of years ago, people dreamed about creating a humanoid which could reason the way that a human did so. And one of those things that humans held as unique to their information processing was the ability to calculate. But it wasn't until 1642 that Blaise Pascal invented the calculator. And so impressed was he with his invention that he said soon it will be able to do all four arithmetic functions and without any assistance from human intelligence. So note the reference to intelligence. So the calculator, which we certainly don't consider to be AI today, was really AI back then. But the reason it isn't anymore is because it's been done by machines for a long time. And so likewise, and more recently, you have things like chess, which were thought of as the pinnacle of human reason. And now you can be beaten by an app on your phone. So you also notice that there's something here that I'm calling extra intelligence, which is usually ignored, but I think is very important. So extra intelligence are those things that computers do better than humans. And this has been something that has existed right from the beginning. Computers are a lot better at things like doing calculations. They can do calculations much faster. They can do it without error, whereas a human, when they're doing calculations, they are likely to make a mistake, even if they've done it hundreds of times already. Another thing that you'll notice here is that while machine intelligence is expanding, human intelligence is static. And it may even be slowly decreasing because there is no selective pressure on the human genome. Now, you're all probably familiar with Alan Turing and his famous Turing test as a definition of artificial intelligence, but I never really liked it for a couple of reasons. One is that it's a test of imitation, and I don't think intelligence is really all about imitation, and it's also about text, because the computer uses a text communication back and forth with the person in order to imitate an actual person. I think intelligence is really about autonomy, and there's different levels. So when I say that intelligence is a matter of degree, These are the degrees. So level 1 is just being able to carry out predefined process without assistance. You think of a car, it's called an automobile because it can propel itself without the help of a horse. Traditional source code also is level 1 autonomy. Then you have learning, which is level 2. But if you just have learning, it's learning one thing and it can do one thing. And if you want it to do something different, it's not going to be able to do that. So that is level 3 autonomy, where an entity can adapt to very different tasks using analogical reasoning, which I'll describe momentarily. And it can even take on completely new tasks. So say you have a chess playing program and you leave it alone for a couple of years and you come back and it's designing buildings. All right, this is the kind of thing that a person could do, but AI cannot do quite yet. All right, so the title of the talk references 2 singularities and instead of just one. So the first singularity is a point in time where computational technology is no longer understood by the culture that created it, resulting in negative effects on human civilization. And this is what it looks like. Where this is from a movie called Idiocracy, and it's about the first singularity. How many people have seen Idiocracy? Oh, excellent. Okay, so you know the audio that goes with this, and you other people should go see it. All right, so here's the main character, and he's found to not have a tattoo that identifies him. And so he's going to get that tattoo done. And things are not going well. All right. So for those of you who have seen the movie, you probably have encountered data systems that are like this, right? Very frustrating. You're trying to do your job every day. My wife and I compare notes at the end of the day. How many data systems have failed us? Okay. And here's the other one where a woman goes to get her fries from Carl's Jr. and she ends up being told by the machine that she's an unfit mother. Okay, so anyway, so that's what it's going to be like. And don't get me wrong, there are some excellent systems out there, but there are many and seemingly more all the time that don't work well. So when will this first singularity occur? Well, these are the symptoms that to look for. So when design flaws and bugs are easy to find on a daily basis. Recently, I just picked a random week and I observed that there were 27 design flaws and bugs that I was able to find in a single week. When service desks specialize almost entirely on workarounds rather than bug fixes, like the famous restart reboot, right? Your system falls into some kind of a fail state. Nobody knows where all those fail states are. You just come back out. Hopefully you don't fall in the same one. There's a whole bunch of other ones. Nobody ever figures out what they are. And then we do DevSecOps and we release another release and maybe it overwrites those errors. Maybe it doesn't. And then when cyber breaches occur due to previously unknown vulnerabilities, I always found that an interesting phrasing because we created that system and it has things in it that are unknown. And then there's the presence of YouTube techno-archaeologists. Archaeologists are people who study civilizations that are pre-literate or lacking in literacy, and they try and understand how those civilizations worked. So you can find those people on YouTube for those systems that are not documented. And then we have a cause as well as a symptom, and that is that we are in a post-literate era. So for thousands of years, humanity has become more and more literate, and then recently we've fallen off of a cliff and become post-literate. Sure, we write exabytes on social media about trivia mostly, but when it comes to important things like documenting our technology, we don't do it. We don't write about it. So what are the causes? Well, I already referred to misuse of SecDevOps, replacing engineering. Engineering involves documentation. And permanent shortage of technical talent is another one. So this data is about high school students who then either did or didn't go on to become majors in college. in the areas of engineering and computer science. And so you can see that unless they have very high scores, 700s and 800s, they're very unlikely to go into those fields. Another statistic is that of the general population, only 1.4% of people are going into those fields. And that's happening at a time when we have a greater and greater demand for this technical expertise. So we have a permanent shortage. But fortunately, the first singularity is reversible. There's two requirements. First, we need to define best practices and follow them. It amazes me that in this day and age, we don't have those, at least not that are followed, right? So I have a list. If you have a list too, we can compare notes. We can fill some of the talent gaps with AI. So this is where AI comes into this, right? So when you're developing software, first you should design it. We don't design it currently, but we can recruit AI to help document what it is that we're designing. And then we already are seeing auto code generation, and that's only going to get better. And then finally, there's testing. So humans, when they test, they can only go through a very small subset of all the states of a system. But a computer can go through orders of magnitude faster. And when it gets to the point where it can also recognize those bug conditions, then we'll have many fewer bugs. Okay, so that's first singularity. The second singularity is the one that you're already familiar with. And this is where AI reaches a point where it sort of takes off and becomes uncontrollable. Use a manuscript covering all this too, if you'd like to get a hold of that. All right, so in order to predict when the second singularity is going to occur, we really need to compare some of the characteristics of humans and machines, because the second singularity is going to occur when machine intelligence completely eclipses humans. So it has to do everything that humans do and then some. And so in comparison, we see that humans have a fallible memory. We forget things. Machines have an infallible memory. They don't forget things. Human memory is associative, and machine memory is concrete. So what is associative memory? Associative memory is memory where when you learn something new, you hang it on a framework of things that you already know. And this is very important because it's the basis of analogical reasoning. So humans are able to carry out analogical reasoning, and machines, traditionally anyway, are non-analogical. So an example of analogical reasoning would be, say, the development of the theory of electromagnetism. Maxwell and other physicists of the time, they were inspired by the work of Newton and his theories. But there's no logical connection. You can't take Newton's theories and then by deduction produce the theories of electromagnetism. That is done by analogical reasoning. Okay, and then other differences that I mentioned before about fallible calculation and logical processing. I should also mention that intuition is another thing that's very important here. And so that analogical reasoning, where does it start? I mean, what is the first thing that we apply an analogy to? Well, it can only be one thing, and that is physical experience. Right, so we need to have physical experience in the machine for a machine to be intelligent to the level of the second singularity. Also, intuition is another thing which is dependent on physical experience. A study of Nobel Prize winners showed that 70% felt that their discoveries were based on intuition, and the other 30% probably just didn't realize it. And do you know how many axioms in mathematics are based on intuition? All of them. Okay, so intuition is a real thing. So here's a prediction. Second singularity is going to occur when machine intelligence is capable of analogical reasoning and has a robotic embodiment, which will allow it to get that real world experience. All right, so you know these two fellows, you got Hawking and Musk, who's going to be doing a cage match soon, hopefully. And they've both warned us of the dangers of the singularity. And Musk went on to say that he thought that we should institute regulation in order to help with that. So a show of hands, how many people think that regulation is going to make AI safe? Okay, I was going to say if anyone raised their hands, we'd have to talk after, but okay. A couple of invalid assumptions about the second singularity. A superior intelligence will want to destroy lesser intelligence, not necessarily. As far as I know, humans have only successfully exterminated 13 species out of the millions of species that are out there. And then another assumption is that superior intelligence can destroy lesser intelligence. So we'd like to destroy parasites and agricultural pests that destroy billions of dollars worth of crops every year, and invasive species and so forth. We can't do it. And then that there will be a single super AI like Skynet in a Terminator. But actually there's going to be multiple, and there already is. So what are we going to do to make sure that things are safe if maybe regulation isn't the thing? So Asimov's 3 laws of robotics is a start. So that was back in 1942, before the first electronic computer even. And I won't go through these in detail, but the idea is to make sure that robots do no harm to humans. So let's update that with the 6 laws of safe AI. The first is that an AI will have to have one or more safety objective functions, which examples are given by Asimov, and those should never be modified. Second is that safety objection functions should always overrule other objective functions. The third is any safe AI building on AIs shall always include its original safety objective functions, and that prevents AI from evolving in a way where it becomes unsafe. And the fourth is that AI shall never have an objective function that seeks to maximize its numbers. That would result in a kind of evolution which would make it competitive potentially against humans. And then the fifth is that the actions of any AI shall be subject to authorized human override. That's basically Asimov's second law. And then all of these laws are about intent, but intent and good intentions are not always sufficient. And so an AI should never be assigned a task that it cannot rapidly or cannot reliably execute. All right, so all of that would help well-intentioned people from creating dangerous AI. But what about people who are not well-intentioned? People who are not well-intentioned are going to create unsafe AI. It's guaranteed. And so what we need is defensive AI, which is AI that we use to counter unsafe AI, and that defensive AI has to be according to the 6 laws. Okay, so in terms of the far future, will humanity survive in the far future? It certainly will not, and that's because genomes are always changing. But we have the opportunity, if we exercise defensive AI, to transform and meld with artificial intelligence. So here's an example of a cyborg. It's a baby with a cochlear implant, microphone, processing, and then tap directly into the auditory nerve. Here's another cyborg based on myoelectric limbs, which is showing us dexterity. And here's one where there's an electrode or an array of electrodes that are implanted directly into this woman's occipital lobe, allowing her to see. And even augmented reality is a kind of cyborgism. This is a F-35 pilot who can see right through the fuselage of his plane. He can see in wavelengths other than the visible and so forth. Okay, so that's cyborgs. Now, a slight change of topics. We said before that humans, their intelligence was static, just like 2 more, was static or possibly declining. So how could that possibly be reversed or changed so that human intelligence can increase again? Well, if you were in here for Gene's talk a little while ago, he kind of gave it away. Any ideas? Did somebody say genetic modification? Okay, yeah, genetic modification. So we're familiar with genetic modified plants and the very controversial GMOs that some people don't eat, but everybody does. But human GMOs, well, that's kind of far-fetched, right? But this man has already done it. So he created 2 girls, and they have an enhanced resistance to AIDS. And after he did that, he was quickly sentenced to 3 years in jail. So one reason why it's controversial, because at this point, it's not reliable, it's not safe. We're not quite sure what the outcome would be, but at some point it will be. And this is very important because we're going to need people to carry out or to supervise those defensive AIs. We need more of them, and they need to be smarter than anybody who's here today. And then we have biohybrids. They're the opposite of cyborgs. You start with a machine, and then from that machine, you add biological mechanisms. In this example, you have a small stingray. It was created with a gold skeleton, a rubber body, and added to that were actual muscle cells. And those muscle cells were genetically modified so that the ray has a behavior, which is that it can follow a light source. So a very simple example, but very interesting. And so in conclusion, we sometimes think of evolution as the end of something, but it really can be the beginning of something as well. And so humanity, if we manage to survive the second singularity by using defensive AI, we will evolve into the cyborgs, the biohybrids, the GMOs, and the pure machine AIs. Thank you for listening.